Hello. Um, this is the examination of the Read Aloud presentation. The book that I read, I don't know if you can see it, Listen Buddy by Helen Lester, and I chose this book, well, the ideal audience that I was trying to teach to was supposed to be like a second grade class. Obviously I had to substitute. I had 3 children, and one of them actually is in second grade. Another one is in kindergarten, but a good reader, and the other one is actually much older, but he's pretty far on the spectrum, so his reading level is actually lower than the other children, and he has a lot of SEL needs and whatnot. So that was the rationale for choosing the book. I chose the book. It was a recommendation from one of our discussions, and I thought it would be good at a second grade level. The questions that I asked were mostly to check on the comprehension of what they were supposed to be getting out of the story at that point, and I focused a lot on their vocabulary. I wanted them to learn some of the words, or at least be confident that they knew what the words were. And SEL was another big thing that I was trying to emphasize with my questions. How did you make the content of your book accessible to all students? I made a glossary. Cannot see that, but basically I pre-read the book and highlighted anything I thought the kids might have a problem with, either with just pure vocabulary or content-wise. And I made a bunch of notes in the margin, and I made the glossary to help them understand the story and learn things about language and the purpose of the story, to enjoy it. And accessibility, another big concern about that was that one of the mock students, as I said before, was on the spectrum, and he has like a marked lack of empathy. So that was one of the SEL focuses, was to show what the characters in the story were thinking, and that was for everybody, but particularly with him. And it came up a lot in the story. What aspects of UDL were used? Engagement from different multiple forms of engagement. As I was speaking, that engaged some of the learners. Visual, I would show them the pictures, and even reading. One of the students in particular really liked using the glossary, which that was very surprising for me. I've never seen anybody get excited about a glossary, but it worked really well. How did I engage the different learners? I am not naturally a very stimulating speaker, but I tried to use faces when I could. I changed my voice for the antagonist, not so much for the other ones. And I would try to incorporate as much movement and kinetics as I could for those types of learners. Like like in the beginning of the story, I would make like a nose and, you know, show teeth, and use my hands as much as I could to show different aspects of the story. How did I make it equitable for the learners? I gave the definitions, and I did as much SEL review as I could, because for some of them, some of the concepts were very basic, and some of them they needed extra help understanding how the different characters in the story were, how they were feeling at that time. How did you provide for different language levels of your students? For that, I should have asked more questions. Like, if this is actually something I didn't do enough of. At the end of maybe after a few pages, or I wouldn't want to ask if anybody had questions after every page, because that seems like it might open it up for just killing the momentum of the book. And that was one of my concerns as I was going through it. I didn't want to explain too many things, because then it stops being a story and it's just kind of like a lesson. And as one of the articles we read, it was so funny, because it goes through all these different things that you need to do when you're reading to the kids, and at the very bottom it says, the most important thing, have fun, you know. So to keep this fun, I was trying to keep the momentum going, and I didn't ask if anybody had questions as much as I should have. Did I incorporate any academic language? This is another one that I feel like I pretty much failed on. I should have, in my post questions, or maybe even in the glossary, identified the different parts of the story. You know, who the characters are, the setting, the plot, antagonist, protagonist, all that stuff. And I could have done that pretty easily, and that would have probably helped them. This story wasn't overly complicated or anything, but it still would have helped them keep engaging with the story after it was done, and in, you know, a reasonably fun way. The only really higher order thinking that I engaged in this was from an SEL standpoint. The main idea of the story was not so complicated, and really I was uncomfortable emphasizing it, because the whole point of the story was to listen, and it took kind of that old school or else kind of narrative, you know, listen or else you're going to get eaten by a varmint. So they understood that, and I let it go with that. Higher order thing was just SEL, trying to figure out who was feeling what at what time. Did I come with a preset group of questions? I had basic questions ready as I was reading, but as soon as I got to the end, I realized I hadn't made post questions. I kind of assumed that the questions would come naturally. You know, what was the purpose of the story? You know, what did we learn? And I thought that would be kind of a discussion, but it was just real basic answers and didn't become too much of a discussion. So if I was to do this again, I would have a lot more engagement type questions ready to go. Did you need to change the questions as you considered the students' reactions? How? Okay, so one problem I had during it was that my Spectrum student was really distracted. I don't know how to articulate it in a proper way, but he's very obsessive about some things, and once he focuses on something, it's nearly impossible to get him to focus on anything else without that first need getting satisfied. So he was fixated on another book pretty much the whole time, and unfortunately he didn't. I'm not sure how much of the story he actually absorbed. For him, I think I would have to. It would have to be in the post questions. Just give him sort of the scenarios that happened in the book, and ask him how those people felt at those points, instead of stopping the story during the story. Maybe I would try it a few times, but like I said earlier, I wouldn't want to stop the momentum of the story to turn it into a lesson. If it didn't happen pretty quickly and organically, I'd have to move on. So in the future, I would just have maybe general questions, and then maybe more specific questions for specific students, or types of things that I felt that they were maybe not engaged with all the way. Was there any disruptions? Yes. One of the students, like I said, this one was very distracted by his obsessive personality, and it wasn't very disruptive. He just asked me a few times about his book during the story, and it didn't mess up the story for the other learners, but for him, like I said, I don't think he engaged very well with the story at all. Another student was just kind of antsy, and for him, it would have helped if I had more eye contact with him. But for me, I know a lot of good readers, they will pre-read something very quickly and then say the story directly to them, looking at them. I'm not very good at that. But if I had more eye contact with him, I think that would have helped. And definitely concept checking questions as we're going along. You know, who said this? What do they want? How do they feel? More directly to him. So I made sure that he was focused and paying attention. When I did ask him to calm down or sit down or what have you, he did do it, but he was pretty antsy. How did I provide for the different special needs and SEL needs? I had two concerns with SEL. Two of the students I thought could benefit a lot from a more heavy SEL emphasis on the story, and two of the students are technically English language learners, although they're not. They're pretty fluent, but they're technically English language learners. And for them, just this is the same things I already said. I made the glossary and emphasized SEL quite a bit, stopping at different points of the story and asking them, what does this mean? How did this person feel? And at the end, reviewing it. What were my strengths and challenges? As I said earlier, I'm not the most engaging reader. When I read, I tend to be kind of, I don't want to say monotone, but I definitely am not good at making voices. And I would like to look at the audience more. If there's notes or something like that, if I'm giving a speech, that's fine. But I'm not very good at reading and then keeping eye contact at the same time. Improvements for next time: definitely structured follow-up questions. I got to the end and I thought that the follow-up questions were going to just come up naturally, but they didn't. The story ran longer than I had anticipated, and I think that kind of took the energy out of the audience, so they were not really as stimulated as they could have been. I think if I read the story faster, maybe they would want to talk about it more if they had more questions. So maybe I could have even left instead of stopping at every page and saying, how does this person feel at this point, just talk about it at the end and have a discussion at that point. What did I learn about myself? So when I was teaching before, I had a lot of techniques for keeping the children's attention during boring lessons or whatever, and I feel like I need to learn more of that for these readings, because that's never something that I did as a teacher before. I would do a lot of echoing. I would read and then they would read, which I really like as a teaching technique. But I've never done just a read to a class. So I don't have a tool bag full of techniques to keep kids captivated, and that's a big thing that I need to work on. It would be great if I could just be more entertaining, but that's sort of fighting my own personality. I just need to come up with a few tricks to keep them captivated. And I think as I read the stories, I don't know if you saw in the other video, but I wrote my notes in the book. I don't know if you can see that, as prompts. At this point I want to talk about this thing, or this is where I want to use this kind of expression. And the more I practice with a particular book, or even just reading in general, I'll know how to change those things. Or maybe I'll just get better at doing voices and whatnot. I was a little disappointed by that, actually. The only voice that I really changed was the antagonist, and I thought that kids were gonna just giggle like crazy, and I was a little disappointed that they didn't really respond too much to it. I'm sure that they differentiated the scruffy varmint from the little rabbit, but there was no chuckles like I was hoping for. So that's what I got to work on.